And live.
And live. Is that camera too far away? Can you see me, YouTube?
All the people's on the YouTube.
All right. We're good.
Welcome back to the weekly fantasy injury report. Dr. Gene Shirokobrod.
Dr. Cory Hough.
So we took a week off last week.
Happy Thanksgiving.
You too.
Thanks.
It was a great Thanksgiving.
Yeah. The Lions lost.
But they almost didn't.
Almost didn't. Which, I don't know what's worse, knowing your team's going to lose or having the crushing sense of defeat in the last 2 seconds of the game.
I think because it was a good game and you were there.
I was there.
You have that to hold on to.
Yep.
Like, it was still fun.
It was a great game to be at. The only way my Thanksgiving could have been any better is if they missed that last second field goal, the Bills, if they would have missed that last second field goal, or if the Lions just didn't get safetied in the end zone, that would have made a big difference. There's a lot of things in that game that could have swayed the results one way or the other, but great game.
It was going back and forth for a while. I mean, they stayed in there.
Mm-hmm.
They competed with one of the top teams in NFL.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal. That's a big deal for the Lions. Speaking of last second field goals, Ravens, Justin Tucker had a 67.
Oh
attempt.
boy. When the graphic came up that said 67-yard attempt, my first thought was he's going to break his own record.
Yeah. And he was close. I mean,
had the
if
right
it was
angle.
66 again, he would have hit it.
It was close. It had the right line, just not the right distance.
Yeah, he should not have been in that position. But that's different. That's a different topic. We're not necessarily talking football logistics here.
But since we mentioned the Ravens, did you see Lamar's kind of in trouble for some inappropriate tweets he tweeted out?
I did see that.
I will not repeat what he said. You can go on Google or Twitter and find what he wrote.
Yes.
Not a good look for somebody who's trying to get a big contract.
No.
I doubt it'll affect it at all. NFL has a quick forget me button when it comes to high profile athletes. He's still going to get paid, but
yes,
still
he'll probably get fined. I don't think it's going to affect his overall payday though. Yeah. He was very frustrated with that game and what people were talking, but he should not have said what he said, the way he phrased it. But
that's probably his like, people forget he's pretty young, you know. Not that that's an excuse, but it shows his immaturity potentially.
I think
to respond to somebody on Twitter,
right? I think it was one of those things where you write the email but you don't send it, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's if you're pissed off,
you meant to hit delete, not
exactly.
Send.
don't hit send. Don't hit send. But he's not on the injured list.
He's not, so we can quit talking about
his
him.
hip is fine. He's going to play. So let's talk about injuries, because last week Thanksgiving we didn't do our show. There was a lot of injuries, and even more piled up this week.
Yeah, and quite a few pretty big names that are probably not going to play again this season.
Yeah, which is the scary thing, because we are a couple weeks away from the playoffs, fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, fantasy playoffs begin week 15 of the NFL season. So weeks 1 through 14 are the fantasy football regular season. Week 15 is typically the beginning of the fantasy football playoffs. So, for example, Elijah Mitchell. I know he's a little down on our list on here, but I just want to bring up that we're in we just had week 12. So we have week 13 coming up.
Lucky 13.
Elijah Mitchell sprained his MCL on his other knee. He hurt his MCL on one knee earlier in the season. This is the other knee, which I guess if there might be a silver lining, it's that, I guess. I don't know if that's silver or rusty, but
copper.
Yeah, copper. But he's likely about 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And if you take into consideration the fantasy football season, that's the rest of the season.
Yeah. So I had Elijah Mitchell in my IR from week 1. I picked him up.
Somebody dropped him pretty early.
Yeah, anticipating that he'd be back, and he was, and he's been my flex for last several weeks, and he did fine as a flex,
especially the first week back.
Yeah. But yeah, I dropped him. I mean, there's no point in even putting him on IR at this point, because his fantasy season is done.
No, the 49ers can keep him obviously on injured reserve for a playoff run
Right.
if they want to, because I know we're going all out of order, but Christian McCaffrey also tweaked his knee on Sunday.
Yeah.
They're calling it knee irritation,
which doesn't mean anything.
No, it means your knee hurts. So we don't know much details, but he was limited a little bit. So now a team that was expecting to have, they're trying to tell me what knee irritation is.
Your sources coming in.
Yeah. So a team that had expected to have Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell, they got rid of their other running back, and I can't think of his name right now, in anticipation of not needing any more running backs. And now both of them have knee injuries and could potentially limit their next upcoming week in Christian McCaffrey's case anyway.
Yeah. So what that means is, one, Elijah Mitchell should not be on your roster at this point. So he doesn't really matter. MCL sprain. He'll probably be back for if the 49ers make the playoffs. He could be a candidate. But 6 to 8 weeks, again, very similar to what he did on his other knee. So the positive is, like you said, that yes, it's his other knee, but he also has already precedent for coming back and being productive. And he was running really, really hard. So he looked good. But from a fantasy standpoint, what that also means is that Deebo Samuel is in play again. Yeah,
but he was... he hurt his hamstring a little bit again. He's been questionable the past couple weeks, kind of limited participation in practice. He's played the past few weeks, but on Sunday he was limited a little bit by his hamstring.
He went out, actually.
Yeah, he went out, but he did come back in.
And he came back in.
But he was not his typical Deebo self. He only had like 5.6 fantasy points or something like that. So good news for 49ers. They have a dynamic player that could step in and be a surprise running back every now and then in Elijah Mitchell's absence. But they need to be healthy, because they're expecting, I mean, they sold the farm for Christian McCaffrey to make this playoff push. And if they have a ton of weapons, but if all of them are injured, that can spell disaster for this year and the future years, because they gave away all their draft picks.
Yeah, that's a big deal. So McCaffrey still obviously is a must play.
He's likely to play too. They may put him on a snap count, but he'll likely play this week. So if you got him, you can probably start him, because one play and he can have a touchdown. So
and vice versa. I mean, when there is already some irritation in the knee, there's always an increased risk of a more significant injury. But because they're saying knee irritation and not a specific condition or issue, it's just he's banged up, which is normal for this time of year. I think the bigger question becomes, is Christian McCaffrey becoming a 4-down, 3-down type of back where he's there all the time, and Deebo will spell him once in a while, or they'll bring up Tevin Coleman from practice squad, or one of their other third string running backs. But
my guess is, with this knee irritation with Christian McCaffrey, they will probably want to give him a little bit of a break if they're expecting a deep playoff push. I don't know how beneficial it would be, unless they're close to losing games, to continue to push Christian McCaffrey. So I have McCaffrey in not my recharge league, in my other league, and 5 fantasy points from McCaffrey was tough to swallow. I lost by 3 points in that league.
That
so
usually covered it.
So it'll be interesting to see how he does the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think with the scenario for 49ers, if you have Deebo Samuel, he becomes a must play, at the very least as a flex position. I think
he already mostly was a must play.
If you have a 6 or 8 team league where you have some more options, some people might not be like, oh, I'll play Deebo as my wide receiver 1 or 2. But now I would definitely plug Deebo in, at least in the flex spot, because I think he's going to get a good bit of looks.
As long as his hamstring's okay.
Right.
Yep. I know we kind of jumped off topic. We talked a lot about the 49ers there. Let's go back to a couple other season enders. We have 2 of them from the same team.
Yeah. Rough.
We already talked about Cooper Kupp. Ankle surgery a few weeks ago. He's out for still the next few weeks, at least, likely the rest of the season, because Matthew Stafford may not return this season.
Yeah, because LA Rams, I mean, it's happening what everyone thought would happen is they bet everything to win the Super Bowl last year, which they did.
Yep.
And nobody's upset because it's worth it, right? You win the Super Bowl, then you rebuild and you come back in a few years, but this is the price they're paying now.
Yeah. Stafford had entered the concussion protocol, I think 2 weeks ago now. And he hasn't played the past 2 weeks. Now they're saying he has a neck strain in addition to the concussion. And they're thinking about just shutting him down for the rest of the year.
Which makes sense.
Yeah. The Rams have won like 3 games this year. The Lions have won more than them, which is,
You have to get that one in there.
Yep. But there's probably no reason to return Matthew Stafford. He's been a little banged up all year. He started the season with an elbow injury. They wouldn't really say what it was, but likely kind of something with like Josh Allen has. They said it wasn't impacting him, but he has not looked that good this year.
No. And who's he going to throw to?
Right. Because he already lost Cooper Kupp.
Yep.
And now another good athlete who has been underperforming, well, I guess kind of his whole career. I think he had like one good season.
He was starting to trend up.
Allen Robinson.
The second.
He broke his foot or a bone in his foot.
Navicular bone?
The navicular bone. He, I believe, already had surgery for it, but he's out for the rest of the season.
Yep, he's out for the rest.
And then a side note, more LA Rams stuff. Aaron Donald has a high ankle sprain.
Yeah,
he's on the defensive end. Doesn't necessarily impact fantasy that much.
Well, it does the defense if you, for some reason, have Rams defense.
That's true. The Rams defense, or when defense, like in fantasy, when the defense on a team in real life is bad, that typically means the offense might throw the ball more, be more productive on the offensive end, but
higher scoring
game. But the LA offense is just down to nothing.
Yeah. Not so much.
Yeah, I wouldn't start any LA Ram now.
Yeah. Well, I shout out to Landry for we traded Metcalf.
Yeah.
This is all right. I have no way of foreseeing this.
Sure.
But I think it's still a good trade because I traded
good for whom?
I got Metcalf and he got Deonta Foreman and Allen Robinson the second. So Foreman is still a great running back. He's still a solid RB2 or flex. But what makes it funnier is we traded earlier in the year and I gave him Bateman as well. And Bateman broke his foot too.
Yeah.
So the 2 receivers that I traded to Landry both broke their foot.
So what you're saying, if we don't want somebody to play anymore, we'll send them to trade them to Landry and then they'll get injured?
Yep. Okay. Correct. Yeah. Correct. One more receiver out for the year, which is somebody you traded.
I didn't have Darnell Mooney.
You didn't trade Mooney?
No. No, I think Linda has Mooney.
Yeah.
She has like half the Bears.
Yeah. I thought you traded. That was one of the trades.
I traded her Khalil Herbert because she had Montgomery from you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I traded her Khalil Herbert as insurance. But no, I didn't trade Darnell Mooney.
So she had him all along.
Yep.
But he's out for the season as well.
Yeah. The Bears, Justin Fields has turned it on the past 3 weeks, I guess, leading up until this past week.
Yeah, which we didn't talk about because we were away.
Yes. He hurt his shoulder, I guess 2 weeks ago now in week 11.
Yeah, one of the last plays.
Yeah. They were calling it a shoulder separation and I believe an AC joint sprain. So the shoulder joint is a very mobile ball and socket joint. It can move all over the place. So what they're saying is that got separated or dislocated a little bit. And then the AC joint, which we talked about before, the acromioclavicular joint is a little bit on top of that shoulder joint, if you think of it that way. That joint was sprained as well, but it's his non-throwing arm. Better case scenario than if it was his throwing arm.
Yeah. But
still not ideal based on Justin Fields' game. He runs the ball a lot,
which is why they kept him out last game.
Yeah,
because he was technically day-to-day, and maybe any other position, or if he was a pocket passer, he would have played.
Yeah.
Delvin Cook is a good example. He had a similar separation, and it's different. Shoulder separation is not the same thing as a shoulder dislocation. It's about how much.
Sorry, I use the same words.
There is that degree of the joint coming apart. So unless they're interchangeably using it, not being specific, which is very common in the NFL, that they're not medical professionals and the reports are not super precise. but because he was warming up, he was on the field before the game, they were trying to see it. And then from what I read, the deciding factor was his gameplay. The coach said for him to perform like he should perform, he would need to run and make contact. And essentially what the Bears are saying is, we're not willing, based on what we've seen from him, to turn him back into a pocket passer.
Yeah.
Right? He needs to be able to run and have contact and be a mobile quarterback. And they didn't think he could perform to that level, so he sat. But every report now is saying that this week, that extra week of rest and recuperation is giving him the chance to play.
There is the conservative mindset, which we've talked about a few times with teams who have an injured player that's on the cusp of coming back, but has a bye week coming up. Justin Fields and the Bears have a bye week, week 14. And that's something the organization has to discuss is what's the benefit of bringing Justin Fields back early if they're not expected to make the playoffs, which I don't know if they are in the hunt. I think a lot of things would have to happen for them to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
So that's just something for them to think about. What's the risk reward of bringing Justin Fields back a week too early when you have a bye week coming up that could give him even more rest?
Yeah. The flip side of that, Chase Claypool had a really big game because the backup quarterback actually threw it around more. He's not quite as mobile as Fields. So Fields is my QB1, and he's like the number 4 QB in fantasy points. So right now I have him started because he's projected to play. To me, this is a risk that outweighs or the reward that outweighs the risk.
In fantasy or in real life?
In fantasy.
Yeah, in fantasy.
If he's playing, he's starting for me. Yes, he could take a hit and re-aggravate it. There's a high probability of that. But again, for me, it's Derek Carr or Justin Fields. And at this point, Fields takes off for a 60-yard run. To me, is worth the risk of 17 to 20 points that Derek Carr might give me.
Yeah, and I feel like Justin Fields is so young and so potentially team changing. Like the entire Bears organization can build around him. I feel like if the Bears are going to send him out to play, that he's probably healthy.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think they'll send him out in this, and that's why he didn't play this last week.
Yeah,
is like he could, but what's the point? So if he plays, I have faith that he'll be able to produce.
They'll strap the bejesus out of that shoulder and protect it, so he's not going to have a ton of.
You'll see him with like linebacker pads instead of.
Yeah, exactly. He'll have armor.
Yeah,
he'll be like can't move. But yeah, if Fields is clear to play, and I'm guessing they'll probably do something similar where he'll be in practices in a limited fashion. He'll take some hits to see how his body feels. If by Friday he is limited participant or full participant, I think he'll have a great shot of playing. But I'm guessing they're going to do what they did last week and say we're going to wait until he's on the field warming up before the game before making that decision.
Yeah. We have a lot of day-to-day players or players that had minor injuries that I hate the day-to-day.
Yeah.
Or questionable. Either of those.
Questionable.
Because we need to know as fantasy managers, we need to know if they're going to play or not. We already talked about Christian McCaffrey, knee injury or knee irritation. They think he's going to play. He's one that kind of like Justin Fields. If you kind of feel like you have to start him if you have him. Najee Harris is one that is a little interesting because he's been underperforming compared to last season all year. He was a phenomenal PPR running back last year because all those dump off passes from Ben Roethlisberger. And then Ben retires and they get, I don't even remember who started for him this year.
Pickens?
Well, Kenny Pickett replaced somebody else.
Mitch Trubisky.
Yeah, Mitch Trubisky. Yeah. Anyway, regardless of who's at quarterback, they're not throwing to Najee as much. So this whole season, he's been underperforming. Right. And then 2 games ago, he did pretty well for Najee. He finally scored a touchdown, and I believe he scored again this past week.
He did.
But
last night.
Yeah, it was last night, wasn't it? But he left the game in the third quarter with an abdominal injury. Yeah. We don't hear a ton about abdominal injuries. My first thought is maybe a hernia. What do you think when you hear abdominal injury?
I was actually watching that game, and I saw what happened. He got looked like the face mask during a tackle right above the iliac bone or the pelvic bone. And he was like holding on to it, and he still went back and he still played, and then he was kind of limping a little bit. So it was right in that area where your lower ribs are and your pelvic bone is, and you have obviously your obliques and abdominals there. So he was very much in between abdominals or maybe an upper hip issue, but he just couldn't shake it off. He was limping a little bit, but he was still running. Then he scored that goal line touchdown, and then they took him off when they were pretty much in a good place.
And then Najee Harris's backup, who's been kind of like battling with him for playing time, he was also out this past week. So now they have something to consider for the Steelers there. What are they going to do moving forward? It'll be interesting. Again, he's day to day. We'll have to monitor it as we go. But if you have Najee Harris, I would be looking for at least some type of insurance policy.
Yeah, agreed. And he hasn't been great at runs after contact or yards after contact. He's been a workhorse. He gets a ton of carries, a ton of looks, and they pound him at the goal line. So he's good for a touchdown or two.
The Steelers just haven't scored a lot of touchdowns.
They just haven't scored a lot of touchdowns. They haven't gotten.
He's a big dude, Najee Harris. A lot of running backs are kind of small. I saw a picture of him next to might have been Chase Claypool. I don't remember, but he's a pretty big
he's a big
running
guy.
back. Yeah,
he's definitely a big guy.
Yeah.
And he tried. He stuck in there, but they took him out.
Yeah,
and day to day.
Another one to take a look at this week is Travis Etienne, who played 2 snaps against the Ravens this week and left the game with a foot injury. It's of note because he missed all of last season with a Liz Frank injury. And I believe
a lot more Liz Franks this year.
Yeah, it's weird. I believe it's the same foot, and that's why they were cautious with him. But if you watch the game, he was on the sidelines. He was laughing.
I was watching the game.
I
was watching the game.
Yeah.
He seemed in good spirits. He was definitely laughing. And
yeah. From what they're saying is they were just being cautious. So he might play this upcoming week with a limited role, kind of like that, like we said with McCaffrey. It is something just to keep an eye on. His backup, I can't remember who it was, Jermichael Murray or something like that. Jermichael Hasty.
Yep.
He did really well in Travis Etienne's absence. So maybe, Etienne's been the workhorse for Jacksonville the past few weeks. Maybe we see a little bit more of him in there to make sure Etienne stays healthy.
Yeah, Hasty had like a 40-yard touchdown reception, a bit of a wheel route.
Yep.
Yeah, he looked good. They were running hard. Jackson was just playing more aggressive football than the Ravens. The Ravens were kind of sleepwalking, but
sure.
I would be cautious about Etienne, but optimistic as well. He didn't look as serious.
Yeah. He didn't look like somebody who's going to be out for multiple weeks on the sidelines. So
somebody that is going to be out for multiple weeks looks like is Michael Carter.
Yeah.
From the Jets.
Yeah. Which it's a shame. They already lost their star running back earlier. Man, this season's so long. I'm already forgetting all these people's names. But he was a rookie. And the only rookie I can think of right now is Dameon Pierce. And I know it's not him. But anyway, Michael Carter stepped in, and the Jets actually got James Robinson, speaking of the Jaguars.
Who was a healthy scratch.
And then Michael Carter gets injured. So they're left with Zonovan Knight, who, I didn't know who he was, a rookie, but he had 11 fantasy points
he had a good game
last night. So depending on the severity of Michael Carter's injury, you can consider Zonovan Knight in deeper leagues. These one-off performances are tough to say, yes, I'm going to pick this guy up and start him.
Yeah.
Maybe pick him up. I don't know. But the Jets' offense is pretty good.
Which helps with their new quarterback, who was actually throwing the ball around and receivers. So that'll open up the running game as well. But Michael Carter is similar to probably Elijah Mitchell is going to be a non-factor for fantasy for a few weeks at least until maybe a deep playoff run. So If they put him on IR, obviously keep him. I wouldn't drop him from your league, especially if it's a deep league. Hold on to him and see what they do. But it's not looking good.
This one on our notes, we write these stuff down. You added Josh Jacobs with a calf strain, and I put a question mark.
Yeah,
because he. I mean,
220 rushing yards with a calf strain.
Yeah, he left the game with a calf strain. He'd been questionable all week, and then comes back in and has an 86-yard game-winning touchdown in overtime. He's been amazing. I saw something from Yahoo Sports that said if you had Josh Jacobs on your team last week, 90% of those teams won.
Yeah,
he's just been unreal.
He had almost 50 points.
A lot of times they call one person has a breakout year or is the league winner. And if you have Josh Jacobs, it's going to be hard to beat you. He's getting 22 carries a game.
Yeah.
I don't know about his passing volume, but
not a ton.
But he doesn't need it when he's rushing for over 200 yards.
No,
he had over 300 total yards.
Total yards.
Yeah. So even his passing upside can be good. So technically, yes, he was questionable with calf strain. He didn't look limited even after he left the game. So we'll keep an eye on it for sure. The person who's winning in our league, Jason, he has Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry. So that's a tough.
That was my 1-2 punch last year.
I know. Except you were just 1 year too early.
I was a year behind, or a year ahead. But calf strains are tricky, and he is a running back. He's a big guy.
When he was questionable all week, and then I got the notification that he left the game with a calf injury. I was like, oh, that makes sense. Calves are like that. You put so much force into them when we run.
And that's explosion, right? Because you're running on your toes and you're pushing off your toes and you're exploding and you're using your calves. From what I read is the Raiders are going to leave him out or limit him drastically in practice.
Okay.
So he's not going to practice a ton this week, which makes the injury report a little bit more complicated because usually you're like, well, if he's limited in practice or not getting a ton of practice time, then he's probably not going to play. But the Raiders are going, no, we're going to keep him out of practice on purpose. And now you really don't know.
Yeah. I tend to think he's playing next week based on how good he did this week.
Yeah, and he kept playing the full game. Yep. So unless he has a setback in limited practice,
which likely won't happen.
So to me, this is very similar to with me and Justin Fields. Right, if he's starting, he's playing.
Yeah, well, you can't. I feel like with Jacobs, especially, you can't not start him.
Yeah,
one of the top running backs in fantasy this year and in real life. He's definitely one to start.
Yeah.
Damian Harris is our last day-to-day guy, not necessarily out for the rest of the season. He's been battling injuries for a while. Ramondre Stevenson has done a great job for New England.
Yeah.
While Damian Harris deals with this stuff. So New England almost doesn't have an incentive to bring Harris back anyway, and he has been ruled out for this Thursday. So if you have Ramondre Stevenson, you're probably already playing him anyway, but he just got a little bit of a boost.
Yeah, he's going to get a ton more looks.
Yep.
Cincinnati front, to finish out before we get to some questions. Jamar Chase looks like he's going to be coming back.
Yep.
And Joe Mixon looks like he's going to be coming back. From concussion protocol.
Good for you. I have Jamar in my other league, Jamar Chase. So good for me in that one. Both were close to coming back last week. I'm sorry. The concussion protocol is interesting because players can look physically fine, but if they don't meet whatever the NFL's requirements are, then they can't play. So that's seemed to be what happened with Joe Mixon. Jamar Chase, there were reports that he was going to play last week. They ended up keeping him out. I think it's a good thing. He's another young guy that they don't want to limit his future. He had a surgery. It was he had a hairline fracture in his hip, and I don't know. They typically don't do surgeries for that. There was something else that required the surgery, and it was only like 2 weeks ago that he was still on crutches. So it makes sense that they kept him out last week. From what I read, it's kind of like you were saying with Justin Fields is when they bring him back, they want to make sure that he's back. So all signs point to potentially this week. Just because a player's back and like I just said, back, that doesn't necessarily mean they're back to the 100% of playing time, because they still might ease him back into it again.
Or capabilities.
2 weeks ago on crutches, maybe he doesn't have 225 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns this time against the Chiefs. I think he plays, which would be a good matchup for them. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see.
Still, the biggest risk factor is re-aggravation, right? We're talking about guys that once they're playing, they're not thinking about their bodies, right? One of the biggest things to return to sport is saying you can play without thinking.
Yeah.
And we saw this with Mike Williams. He came back a couple weeks ago.
He came back, I think it was just, it was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
First play, or his first catch. He jumped up, looked great, caught the ball
on the sideline,
landed on his toes, and was out the rest of the game.
Yep. And just re-aggravated.
And that's a good thing on his end of he wasn't thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like you were saying.
He played.
He played, he jumped, he caught the ball. He didn't look hesitant to jump. So the good and bad of that is sometimes those injuries come back. So Jamar Chase is one that's tough to bench if he's active. But reports are suggesting that it might be a limited role.
Yeah.
But they also said that about Marquise Brown with the Cardinals. He played all but 1 snap in the first half. He was supposed to be on a snap count, and he led the team in targets.
Yeah, but he was also he was out for about 6 or so weeks, so he's had longer to heal up from. But yeah, you got to be a little bit more cautious with Jamar Chase. It's hard to not play him, especially what most likely it's going to amount to a high-scoring shootout type of game. Mixon's a no doubt. He's a must play, must start. They gave him an extra week to recover from the concussion, and by all reports, he looks like he's clear and should be good to go.
Yep.
Do some questions?
Yeah, we have a few questions here. Cameron, actually, let's start with Blurpy. Blurpy says, who would you rather have rest of season? Mike Evans, I'm guessing Mike Evans, not Chris Evans, the backup running back to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Mike Evans, Olave with the Saints, or Deebo Samuel. You say your pick, and then I'll say mine.
I want to say Evans because you and I have a trade proposal out for Evans right now. I really like if the Saints had a quarterback that could actually get the ball out.
Yeah.
I would maybe surprisingly say Olave because he's shown really great burst and separation, and they don't have anybody else to catch the ball.
Yeah.
So he's one of the only receivers that will catch it. If they put Jamarcus in or Winston in, and I'd be like, yes, go, because they'll throw.
Winston was thrown to him all the time.
He'll get him. He's great.
Olave led the league. He might still be leading the league. I don't know, in air yards, meaning like the how far down the field they're throwing to him.
He looked great.
Yeah.
So if they put Winston back in, I'm still not quite sure why Dalton is still in at quarterback because they got shut out last week. So it's not like he's looking good.
Yeah.
That's my if. If Winston goes back in, I'd pick Olave. But at this point, I would pick Deebo.
Yeah. Deebo is my pick too. I'm in your case, Blurpy. I have Deebo and Mike Evans on my team, and Mike Evans has been on my bench. Last week 2 weeks ago they had a bye or something, but Evans was on my bench this week. It's hard to sit Deebo in such an explosive offense in the 49ers right now. I know they got a lot of mouths to feed with Christian McCaffrey, with George Kittle, even Brandon Ayuk's having a good year, but they can use Deebo in so many ways that it's tough to sit him over anybody else right now. And Mike Evans, a lot of name power. Tom Brady throwing to him, historically speaking, scores a lot of touchdowns. It just hasn't been the case this year.
Well, the thing with Evans as a positive, which is one of the reasons I still want him, is he had like 9 or 11 attempts or looks last week. Yeah. So it's not like he's not getting the looks or the tries. It's just for some reason they haven't connected over the last couple weeks.
And the announcers were saying it just looked like their chemistry was off.
Yeah.
Like their timing was just a little bit off, and
it's almost like they're divorced.
Too soon? Yeah, too soon. Okay. Too soon. I like Mike Evans. I like all three, obviously, but I think I would go Deebo. Keep Evans for upside.
I'd go with Deebo as well. Garoppolo's still the biggest weakness for Debo. But with Mitchell going out and McCaffrey potentially with a banged up knee, I think Debo becomes the choice for the rest of the season.
Yep, he's a little more valuable now. Tampa Bay has a couple more options with Chris Godwin performing so well right now. So, Debo out of those three. Okay. Cameron has kind of a long question here. He's in a 16 team full PPR league. We're having trouble in our 14 team league, so 16 is a lot. He's in dire need of a win this week to keep his playoff hopes alive. Okay. He gets pretty typical: 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a flex, and a tight end. Here are his options. He wants to know who to start.
Okay.
Running backs: Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Kareem Hunt, Isaac Pacheco, or Alexander Madison. I feel like your first 2
are no-brainers.
Yeah. Even with Christian McCaffrey's knee irritation, out of those ones, I feel like you got to stick with CMC and Saquon Barkley.
Yeah. Although Pacheco's making a strong case for at least a flex play.
But interesting to note, they just picked up Melvin Gordon.
Yep.
Signed to the practice squad, but it is something to note for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, I feel like that hurts Clyde Edwards-Helaire more than Pacheco, though.
CEH is weird. He scored a lot of touchdowns this year early on, the first half of the season, and then we saw his production not be very efficient.
Yeah, they started to lose interest in him.
And now Isaiah Pacheco looks good. He looks explosive.
He looks
very good. But the fantasy production is not quite there yet. That's why we're leaning CMC and Saquon Barkley for running backs. Wide receivers on Cameron's list: A.J. Brown, Amari Cooper, Brandon Ayuk, Treylon Burks.
Treylon Burks has been making a great burst over the last 2 weeks for the Titans.
Yeah.
I tried to pick him up. Rachel snagged him before I could.
Yep.
I think he's a great pickup. He's not quite there. I'd like to see a couple more weeks. But I would pick A.J. Brown and Ayuk from that list.
Yeah. What I would consider, I'm between Amari Cooper and Brandon Ayuk. Amari Cooper tends to do really well at home. I would consider if the Browns are playing at home.
Yeah.
Another thing, I might go Amari Cooper. Now we're tinkering.
You gotta let Deshaun Watson prove himself.
Deshaun Watson's coming back this week, and we don't know his connection with Amari Cooper. I heard reports that in the offseason they stayed connected. They stayed. They would throw routes to each other. So in theory, they'll do okay. If you want to. I feel like if you want to risk it for some big points, maybe Amari Cooper over Ayuk, but it's a tough choice. Yeah. I'm leaning Cooper. I go Cooper. Gene goes Ayuk.
Yeah, I go Ayuk. I think Ayuk's trending up. I think he's building great chemistry with Jimmy Garoppolo.
He scored some touchdowns.
Yep, Jimmy's looking his way a lot more. I think Debo gets a lot of coverage, which frees up Ayuk. Debo plays in the slot more. Ayuk's been the more of a deep threat. Where I would agree with you is in his tight ends. I'll pick Njoku over Knox because I think, if anything, Deshaun Watson's going to target that big tight end. Yeah. And Njoku's going to be a big target for him.
Njoku's been pretty good this year.
Yeah. Dealt with some injuries.
Yeah. But the tight end field is so tough. And Dawson Knox for the Bills. Yeah. He just hasn't produced quite like Njoku. So I'd go in Njoku there. Good. That's a pretty good team for a 16-team league.
Yeah, that's a really good team.
Yeah. Good luck, Cameron.
Last second question that came in from Clamped Easy. Someone sent me Saquon Barkley for Ramondre and Marquise Brown. Should I accept? I don't even know why you're asking this question right now. That should be an absolute accept. I'm guessing that you get Saquon Barkley. I would definitely accept that.
Yeah, trade questions are tough because it depends on if you can afford to get rid of a receiver and a running back, but Saquon's been so good this year.
He's like one of the top 2 running backs, and the Giants are in the playoff hunt. As the weather gets colder in the New York area, they're gonna run that workhorse. So he's only going to get more and more looks. So
The Giants' passing game hasn't quite been there recently this year. So I think Saquon. I think that's a good trade. Saquon Barkley.
I think it's fairly even because we talked about Stevenson. He's going to get a lot of looks with Harris out.
Yep.
I still don't trust Marquise Brown because even when he was in the Ravens, he was very injury prone.
That's true too.
So he's coming back from a foot injury that's been lingering for his entire career. You have no idea how well Arizona's going to play. So if they start losing games again, there's a high probability they'll sit him and give him rest. Again, that's speculation, but to me, Barkley is a no-brainer here.
I feel like the fantasy production you can get from Saquon Barkley outweighs the fantasy production you can get from either of the other two. Like, I think you could find, maybe not on this isn't a 16-team league.
No.
I think you can find a wide receiver that gets you close to Marquise Brown. It's tough to get a running back anywhere near Saquon this year.
Yeah, I'll definitely go with Barkley if that's offered to you. If not, hold on to him. Don't trade him away for those two players. All right, I think that's it. Unless any last second questions come in, I went from 10% playoff shot to having the 5th playoff seed right now.
Yep.
So we have 2 games left. I think I need to win at least one of those 2 games.
That would be helpful
to make it in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty excited. I have Mitchell, I lost as a flex, but I have Mixon coming back.
Yep.
Justin Fields is a big question mark for me if he can play. I think that goes a long way. But I am playing Jason this week, who's our number 1 seed right now.
Last little bit, Cameron. He needs a flex play out of those. Well, there's your answer. Play Amari Cooper and Ayuk.
Yep.
And I think those two have more upside than any of the running backs that you have. So play one of them as a receiver and the other as a flex.
Yeah,
that's good.
Jameson Williams is
he's good for like keeper leagues, right? He's on the Lions.
Yeah. He's coming back. I think he came back from IR, so he has to work into.
I tend to lean more prove it before you start him, and that's why I would lean with the other guys before him.
Yeah,
but he's definitely a good talent. He's a first round.
Yeah, he's a huge
pick,
talent.
So yeah,
I'm gonna go. Depends on your risk here, Cameron. I really like the upside of Treylon Burks. His confidence is going up. He's getting a ton of looks from.
But he has Tannehill thrown to him.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
but they have who else is Tannehill going to throw to? So Burks is a legit deep
Derrick Henry
threat. Exactly. So he's a legit deep threat, and he's shown to do that. He reminds me of Christian Watson a little bit. That early on, a ton of talent, dropped a lot of balls, just didn't feel confident. But in the last 3 weeks, just absolutely exploded on the scene. And Tannehill's looking at him. Whoever's playing quarterback at Green Bay at this point, whether it's Love.
Oh yeah.
Or
Aaron Rodgers might not play this week. Side note.
So I like Burks. So it depends on your risk, but I would flex Burks.
Flex. All right.
If I had him, I would have flexed him this week for me.
I'd probably still go with Cooper or Ayuk, but Treylon Burks, he's the best option.
I don't trust
for Tennessee.
I don't trust the Cleveland offense enough to put Cooper in there. I just don't. I want to see what Watson can do. He hasn't played in
600 days.
Exactly. So
that's not an exaggeration.
That's a lot of rust for a quarterback to come back from. So yeah, I would play Burks. Yeah. And if you win, we get to share your win. If you flex them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
All right. Thanks for tuning in. A bit of a longer episode, but we had essentially 2 weeks of injuries to cover.
Yep.
Good luck on your playoff push. Hopefully your teams stick together. If you enjoyed this, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We'll be back next week. We're aiming for Tuesdays to be the time slot, so you have time to look at the waiver wire and go over that. Any closing thoughts for you?
No. Good luck with your final fantasy playoff push. Yeah.
We'll catch you again next week. Bye from Recharge.
Good.
I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, we're kind of a big deal.